A low, trembling growl of thunder rolled over the sleeping suburbs of Austin, Texas, rattling loose windows and sending waves of unease through every quiet street. Rain lashed the windshield, blurring the orange glow of the prison floodlights in the distance. Inside her aging Subaru, Emma Caldwell sat frozen behind the wheel, knuckles white, body taut as a drawn wire. For a full minute, she didn't even blink. The radio's digital clock flashed 2:37 a.m., mocking her with every silent pulse. Next to her, sprawled awkwardly across the front seat, was Duke, a massive, coal-black German shepherd, too big for the car, too loyal to care. His head was pressed against Emma's thigh, and his brown eyes never left her face. Now and then he'd exhale sharply, the air puffing against her hand. A subtle reminder that he was there, that she wasn't alone in this storm. But Emma felt completely, painfully alone. Every thunderclap pulled her mind further into the past, to a courtroom 8 years ago, a case that changed her life, for better or for worse. She remembered the pale, trembling hands of Richard Gaines, the way he had stared at her from the defense table as she outlined the evidence, her voice hard and steady, convincing 12 jurors to send him away forever. He was just a homeless man, no family to fight for him, no resources. And yet, even when the verdict was read, he hadn't looked angry, just heartbroken. Now, a decade's worth of guilt pressed down on her chest, threatening to suffocate her. The storm outside seemed to echo her thoughts. What if I was wrong? What if he's innocent? Emma shook herself. She needed to move. She needed to breathe. The prison loomed up ahead, a fortress of unforgiving brick and steel, its gates locked down for the night. She knew Richard Gaines was inside, scheduled to die at dawn for the murder of a woman named Linda Klein, a crime Emma had believed, with all her heart, that he'd committed. But new evidence had surfaced. Whispers of tampered files, a print that didn't match anyone at the scene. She'd ignored those doubts, told herself it was too late, told herself that prosecutors couldn't afford to second-guess every hard decision. But as the years passed, the doubts only grew. Every time she saw a man living on the street or heard about a wrongful conviction on the news, she felt a needle of dread burrow deeper under her skin. Another peal of thunder shook the air. Emma's phone vibrated on the dashboard, a new message from Olivia. Awake? I know you're at the prison. Let's talk. Come home if you need. Duke wants dinner. Emma's lips twisted into a half smile at that last line. She reached down and stroked the big dog's head, grateful for his warmth. She thought of Olivia, her best friend, her anchor in a world gone sideways. Olivia, who had rescued Duke from a high-kill shelter after his old handler died. Olivia, who never stopped chasing stories, no matter how dangerous, no matter how many people tried to shut her up. Olivia was the one who kept bringing up Richard's case, who pushed Emma to look again at the evidence, to consider the possibility that she'd been wrong. Tonight, with the execution looming, Emma finally let the possibility take root. She opened the glove compartment and pulled out the battered manila folder that Olivia had given her, marked Gaines Review. The file was thick with old police reports, legal briefs, crime scene photos. She flipped to a yellow sticky note Olivia had scrawled. Print on doorknob, never matched victim or Richard. Why? Emma's hands trembled. She looked again at the prison, swallowed by rain and shadow. There was no way she could let this night pass without doing something. If Richard Gaines died, and she'd helped send an innocent man to his death, she shuddered, memory slamming back. The judge's gavel, the stunned silence, Richard's hollow eyes boring into hers. Emma started the engine, the car's old frame shuddering to life. Duke perked up instantly, sensing action. She shifted into drive, wiping away tears she didn't remember crying. You're not too late. Not yet. Don't freeze. Move. She sped through the empty streets, wipers screeching, lights blurring by. Her old law office was only 10 minutes away, a relic of her past before she'd burned out, before the stress and shame had driven her to quit. But she still had her keys, still knew the alarm codes. She needed to get inside, to look at the original case files, to see if the evidence that haunted her nightmares was really as rock solid as she'd once claimed. As she drove, Emma's thoughts twisted in on themselves, each question more painful than the last. Had she really missed something crucial? Had the pressure to win, to get justice for the victim, clouded her judgment? Or had someone else played her, using her as a pawn in a much larger, uglier game? Duke whined, sensing her distress. Emma reached over, fingers threading through his thick fur. "We'll fix it, boy," she murmured. "We have to." She made a hard right, tires skidding slightly on slick pavement, and pulled up to the darkened office building. The rain was coming down even harder now, sheets of water pounding the hood, soaking her as soon as she stepped outside. Duke leaped out after her, ears up, every muscle tense. Emma fumbled with her keys, finally clicking open the back door. She and Duke slipped inside, the musty smell of old coffee and forgotten paperwork washing over them. Every shadow seemed to flicker, every creak and groan of the building amplifying her nerves. She hurried down the hallway, past the empty reception desk, into the file room. Duke padded beside her, tail held high, ever alert. Emma yanked open the metal cabinet, searching through rows of files until she found it. Richard Gaines. She laid it on the table, heart pounding. She glanced at Duke, who sat beside her, silent and watchful. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the room in stark white for a split second. Emma opened the file. The storm raged, but inside, a different kind of storm was just beginning. A storm of guilt, of truth, of the desperate hope that she still had time to make things right. The storm hammered the office windows, lightning glinting off the rows of metal cabinets. Emma's breath fogged in the chilly file room as she paged through the folder, her mind already battered by exhaustion. Duke settled by her feet, his head resting on her boot, as if grounding her in the moment, something real, something present, in a night riddled with uncertainty. She flipped through the first report, the summary, the timeline, the evidence. Everything looked so official, so final, written in that confident clinical prosecutor's hand she once trusted. But now, under the harsh fluorescent light, those words felt brittle. How many times had she repeated them in court, building a wall around her own doubts? Richard Gaines was seen near the scene. Traces of blood found on his jacket. Motive? Petty theft gone wrong. Emma traced her finger along each line, searching for comfort in the certainty she used to feel. It was gone. She pulled out a faded crime scene photo. Linda Klein, the victim, slumped in her living room, evidence markers scattered like tombstones. Even now, Emma could recall the trial, the way the DA's office had buzzed with excitement over the high-profile case. She was young, ambitious, desperate to prove herself. No one questioned her conviction. Why would they? Except Olivia. Emma's phone buzzed again, another message. "Still up? I have something you need to see." She typed back, "At the office. Bring coffee." Within half an hour, Olivia arrived, hair plastered to her cheeks by the rain, clutching 2 steaming paper cups and a battered cardboard box labeled Gaines. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "You haven't slept, have you?" Emma shook her head, glancing away. "There's no time. They'll execute him at dawn." Olivia dumped the box onto the table and pulled out a pile of notes, newspaper clippings, and a dog-eared notebook. "Emma, I know this is hard, but you need to see what I found." Her voice was soft, but carried the weight of a dozen late nights spent digging for cracks in the story. Duke perked up, tail thumping as Olivia crouched to give him a scratch. "You keeping her honest, buddy?" she asked the dog, who wagged as if he understood. The 2 women sat, coffee cooling as Olivia outlined what she'd found. Richard's alibi was never properly checked. The gas station attendant, Lyle, told police Richard was there, but nobody followed up after Lyle changed his statement. And look, she pulled a page from her notebook, covered in red ink. Richard's confession wasn't recorded. He didn't sign anything. The detective said he confessed, but that guy had a reputation for cutting corners. Emma's stomach twisted. She remembered that detective, Grant, loud and cocksure, always pushing for a quick result. Why would he lie? Olivia hesitated, then slid over a stack of old emails. Maybe because someone wanted the case closed fast. The victim, Linda, was about to blow the whistle on her company. Financial crimes, money laundering, the works. The company VP, Gregory Milner, was at the scene that night, but never interviewed. She jabbed the table for emphasis. Why? Emma stared at the names, the facts she'd missed or ignored. Because he had an alibi. His secretary vouched for him. Olivia shot her a hard look. And now that secretary lives in Florida, off a payout from Gregory's company. Emma pressed her palms to her forehead, trying to steady her breathing. It's too much. It can't all be a coincidence. Olivia's voice softened. I started digging into Richard's case last year, couldn't let it go. The more I looked, the more holes I found. And there's something else. Duke. She smiled at the big dog. You saved him? But maybe he'll save Richard too. Emma blinked. What do you mean? Olivia hesitated, then pulled a flash drive from her pocket. Last month, I visited Richard in prison. I told him about Duke, and he asked if Duke still chases his tail in his sleep. Olivia looked down, voice breaking. Richard loves animals. He volunteered at a shelter before he was arrested. Said dogs were the only creatures that never judged him. Emma's throat tightened. I remember. He wanted to see Duke before the sentencing. Lightning flashed, lighting up the streaks of rain on the windows. Emma glanced at the clock. 3:51 a.m., less than 4 hours left. She forced herself to focus. What's on the drive? Olivia's eyes burned with intensity. Notes from my interviews. And something else. I met Hector, the delivery man who said he saw someone else leaving the scene. He was scared. He told me someone threatened him to keep quiet. Emma felt as if the air had been sucked from the room. Did you record him? Olivia nodded, face grim. He let me. Said he'd only talk if I promised never to release his name. The recording's on there. You need to hear it. Emma plugged the drive into her laptop. Static, then a nervous male voice. I saw a guy leave. He wore a suit, not like that homeless man. I told the cops, but they said it wasn't important. I got scared. They said I'd lose my job. Emma froze. Duke whined, nudging her hand as if sensing her distress. Olivia leaned forward. Emma, you quit your job because this case broke you, but you can't run from it forever. If Richard is innocent, we're the only ones left who can save him. Emma stared at the old file, the recordings, the dog at her feet, and the friend who refused to let go of the truth. A new surge of determination flickered in her chest. Cold, sharp, undeniable. I'm in, she said quietly. We reopen everything. Tonight. Olivia grinned, exhausted but triumphant. That's the Emma I remember. Emma looked at Duke. Ready to save a life, buddy? The dog's tail thumped in answer. They began mapping out their plan. Re-examine every piece of evidence, track down every old witness, call in favors with anyone who'd still listen. Emma would reach out to Jack Harlan, a disgraced former detective with a reputation for honesty and a bitter grudge against corruption. Olivia would keep digging, looking for anything that could buy Richard time. Dawn was approaching, but for the first time in years, Emma felt awake. She didn't know if she could undo the past, but she refused to be paralyzed by guilt any longer. There was too much at stake. Richard's life, the truth, and her own redemption. Outside, the storm continued, relentless. Inside, hope, fragile, stubborn, began to grow. Emma worked by the pale, flickering glow of the desk lamp, surrounded by piles of files and the low hum of the office heater fighting against the chill from the storm. Olivia's investigative box was a treasure trove of chaos, labeled folders, loose photos, battered notebooks, and receipts, each a breadcrumb from months of obsessive research. The clock on the wall clicked closer to 4:30 a.m. The world outside the rain-streaked windows was a blur of black and silver. Duke, sprawled on the threadbare carpet, thumped his tail now and then as if encouraging Emma each time she reached for another sheet of paper. Olivia was hunched over her laptop, eyes darting between browser tabs, case law, social media, the online portal for Austin's police department. Emma was desperate for a sign, A single piece of evidence to break the deadlock and save Richard from a fate she feared was undeserved. A half-hour passed in silence. The rain softened to a steady tap. Emma sifted through a box labeled Forensics. Inside was a packet of documents she didn't recognize, stamped with her old signature, but with new notations in Olivia's sharp, looping handwriting. She turned to a worn fingerprint report from the original investigation. A yellowing page she barely remembered. Her eyes scanned the lines. Latent print recovered from doorknob does not match victim, Linda Klein, or defendant, Richard Gaines. Emma's breath caught. "Olivia," she said, barely above a whisper. "Look at this." Olivia slid her chair over. "That's the report I found last week. It was buried in the appendix, never introduced at trial." Emma frowned, memories flooding back. "They told me the print was too smudged to be useful, but this says the opposite. It's clear enough for a comparison, just not in the database." Olivia's jaw tightened. "That's the part that's always bothered me. Why would they ignore a print that didn't match either Richard or Linda? Who else was in the apartment?" Emma leaned back, the chair creaking under her weight. The defense never even mentioned this. Richard's lawyer was so out of his depth, he missed half the discovery file. Duke lifted his head and stared at Emma, as if willing her not to give up. Emma sifted through more papers, her pulse racing. What if the killer was someone no one ever suspected? Someone who had a reason to get rid of Linda and pin it on Richard? Olivia nodded. "That's what Hector said, the delivery man. He insisted he saw a man in a suit leaving the building that night, but the police wrote him off because he wasn't reliable. I interviewed Hector 3 weeks ago, but when I tried to contact him again for a follow-up, he'd disappeared. Apartment empty, neighbors said he moved out in the middle of the night. No forwarding address." Emma's mind worked in overdrive. Someone wanted him gone. Someone with power. Olivia's phone chimed. She glanced at the screen, frowning. "Speak of the devil, I just got an encrypted message. Blocked number. It says, 'Stop looking for Hector. He doesn't want to be found.'" Emma's skin prickled. "We're getting close." There was a heavy knock at the back door. Both women stiffened, their hearts jumping. Duke growled, a low rumble deep in his chest. Emma exchanged a glance with Olivia, who carefully reached under the desk for the pepper spray she'd brought along, a habit from years of covering rough stories. Emma moved quietly through the hall and peered out the small window. There, shrouded in the darkness, was a man in a rain-soaked trench coat, his hands raised in surrender. Emma cracked the door open just enough to see his face under the flickering security light. "Jack Harlan?" Emma's voice was cautious, but relieved. Jack gave a tight nod, pulling off his hat and shaking the rain from his graying hair. "I came as soon as I got your message. I figured it was bad if you were calling me." Emma let him in. Duke sniffed him once, then stood at Emma's side, tail high, but not aggressive. Jack knelt and gave Duke a friendly scratch. "Good dog. You remember me, huh?" Emma offered a quick, grateful smile. "We need your help, Jack. This is Olivia." Olivia nodded, still tense. Jack's eyes were tired but sharp. "If this is about Richard Gaines, you're running out of time." Emma nodded, thrusting the fingerprint report at him. "We found a latent print at the scene. Not Richard's, not the victim's. Never followed up on." Jack's face darkened. "That print bothered me for years. I tried to run it, but by then I'd already been sidelined. I kept digging, asked too many questions, you know the drill. Next thing I know, I'm off the force, reputation in the gutter." Olivia shot Emma a knowing look. "He got fired for challenging the DA's office." Jack pulled out a notebook of his own, one even more battered than Olivia's. "I kept notes, even after they shut me out. Hector's testimony, the print, the connections to the victim's company. Gregory Milner's name kept coming up." Emma's heart skipped. "Gregory, he was VP at Linda's company. I went to college with him, but he had an alibi." Jack's expression hardened. Gregory was always too slick, too connected. He was at the scene an hour before Linda died. "Hector said he saw a man in a suit. Gregory fits the bill." Emma's mind whirled. If Gregory's behind this, he might be trying to tie up loose ends. That would explain why Hector vanished and why we're getting warnings. Jack nodded grimly. We need to move fast. Hector was living in a rundown apartment near East Riverside. If he left anything behind, it'll be there. Olivia glanced at the clock. Less than 3 hours. We need evidence. Something the governor can't ignore? Emma closed the file, resolve hardening inside her. Let's go. Now. They hurried out into the wind and rain, Duke at their heels. The drive across Austin was tense and silent, headlights slicing through sheets of rain. Jack led them to Hector's old apartment, a battered building with peeling paint and a buzzing neon vacancy sign. Inside, the hallway stank of mildew and old cigarettes. Jack rapped on the door. No answer. He pulled a set of old lockpicks from his pocket and made quick work of the flimsy lock. The apartment was deserted, but Duke's nose twitched as soon as they stepped inside. He began sniffing the baseboards, tail wagging as he followed a scent trail. In the far corner, behind a threadbare couch, he pawed at a loose panel in the wall. Emma knelt beside him and pried it open. Inside, taped to the wall, was a small metal key and a cheap plastic USB drive. Olivia's hands shook as she turned the USB drive over in her fingers. What do you think is on it? Jack shrugged, but there was a flicker of hope in his eyes. Only one way to find out. But if Hector left it for someone to find, it might be our smoking gun. Emma took the key, pocketing it. Let's get back to the office. We're running out of time. The storm raged outside as they hurried back through the night, but for the first time, Emma felt the possibility of hope. The truth wasn't dead yet, not if they kept pushing, kept fighting. As they sped back toward the light, the shadows seemed just a little less threatening. The ride back to the office was tense. The city, usually calm at this hour, seemed restless beneath the storm clouds. Sheets of rain danced under streetlights, distorting the world outside into a swirling, shifting mirage. Emma's hands tightened on the steering wheel as they sped down the empty streets. Jack in the passenger seat, Olivia and Duke squeezed together in the back. No one spoke much. Each was locked in their own anxious calculations, minds racing against the relentless countdown to dawn. Jack occasionally glanced back at the USB drive Olivia clutched tightly in her fist. If Hector left that for us, he knew someone would come looking. We should expect trouble. Emma's jaw clenched. We've come this far. I'm not stopping now. Richard Gaines will not die because we were scared off. Duke whined softly, pressing his head against Olivia's knee. She absently stroked his fur, grounding herself. Let's just hope what's on that drive is enough. They reached Emma's office. The old building felt like a sanctuary now. Familiar, if only because its worn corners had witnessed Emma's best and worst moments. They hurried inside, Jack checking over his shoulder before closing the door. Olivia immediately plugged the USB drive into Emma's laptop, fingers trembling as she navigated the folders. Duke curled up at Emma's feet, eyes fixed on the door, muscles coiled and ready. The drive contained only a single folder, labeled in shaky capitals, Listen. Inside was an audio file, and nothing else. Olivia double-checked for viruses or hidden malware. She'd learned caution the hard way, reporting on dangerous stories, but found nothing unusual. Should I play it? She asked, her voice a whisper, as if afraid to disturb the fragile hope in the room. Emma nodded. Go ahead. The file crackled to life. For a moment, all they could hear was labored breathing and muffled background noises, traffic maybe, or the humming of an old refrigerator. Then a man's voice, quivering and desperate, broke through. Gregory, please, you don't have to do this. I swear, I never said anything about the money. I'll disappear. Just don't do this. Another voice, cold and chillingly calm, interrupted. You already did enough damage, Richard. You should have known better than to cross me, and now you'll take the fall. You're perfect for this. Nobody will believe you. The file ended with a heavy thud and a choking sound, as if someone had dropped the recorder in panic. The silence that followed was deafening. Jack was the first to recover, running a hand over his face. That's Gregory Milner. I'd recognize that smug tone anywhere. Olivia let out a shaky breath. He's admitting it. He framed Richard. He even mentions the money and the setup. This is the break we needed. Emma's mind whirled. She remembered college with Gregory, his easy charm, the way he always knew just how to manipulate a room. He'd been ambitious, ruthless, and completely unafraid to bend the rules for personal gain. Still, she'd never imagined he was capable of something like this. Jack looked at her, his eyes grim. You realize this makes you a target. Gregory's got money, connections, and nothing to lose. Emma forced herself to stand. Then we move fast. I'm going to call the governor's office and push for an emergency stay of execution. We need to get this audio file into the hands of someone who can act on it now. Olivia frowned, her reporter instincts kicking in. We also need to find Hector. If he's still alive, he's in danger. Jack nodded. I'll see what I can dig up on Hector's last known whereabouts. But we need to be careful. Gregory probably has eyes everywhere. Don't use your regular phones. Stick to encrypted apps, and don't go anywhere alone. Emma's heart pounded as she loaded the audio file onto 3 separate USB sticks. One goes to the governor's office, one to the Innocence Project lawyer I trust, and one stays with us. Olivia, you'll take Duke and stay somewhere safe. Jack, you come with me. Olivia shook her head. No way. If Gregory's men are looking for witnesses, they'll come after all of us. We stick together. Duke seemed to agree, rising to his feet and pressing himself protectively between the women. Before Emma could reply, her office phone rang, its shrill sound slicing through the tension like a knife. She exchanged a wary glance with Jack, then picked up, keeping her voice steady. Emma Caldwell. A distorted, mechanical voice crackled on the other end. Stop digging, drop the case, or someone you love will get hurt. The line went dead. Emma stared at the receiver in disbelief. They know. Gregory knows we're onto him. Jack locked the door and closed the blinds, his movements rapid and controlled. This just got a lot more dangerous. We need to disappear until we get the evidence delivered. Olivia's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You're being watched. Emma felt a surge of fear, but forced herself to focus. Okay, we split up. Jack and I go to the governor's office with the file. Olivia, you take Duke and head to my place. It's safer than your apartment. Stay off main roads. Olivia hesitated, eyes darting between Emma and Jack, but finally nodded. I'll keep my phone off. I'll check in when I get there. Duke pressed close to Olivia as they hurried out the back exit. Emma locked eyes with her friend. Be safe, and call me if you see anything weird. Olivia offered a tight smile. You too? Emma and Jack dashed to his battered SUV and sped across the city, the USB drive clutched tight in Emma's palm. Jack kept scanning the rearview mirror for any sign they were being followed. The city's nightlife, already subdued by the storm, was now eerie and empty. Every parked car, a potential threat. Meanwhile, Olivia navigated side streets with Duke riding shotgun, alert and quiet. She watched for headlights in the mirror, nerves buzzing. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her, tracking her every move. At a stoplight, she spotted a black sedan lurking half a block back. She took a sudden right, heart hammering. Duke barked once, a sharp, warning sound. Olivia sped through a red light, tires squealing, determined not to lead anyone to Emma's safe house. She pulled into an all-night grocery, ducked inside, and waited. The sedan cruised by, then disappeared. Only when she was certain she hadn't been followed did she double back, finally arriving at Emma's place. She locked the door, pulled the curtains, and checked every window. Duke sat by her side, watching the door, a silent guardian. Back at the office, Emma and Jack pulled into the governor's annex, a stately building ringed with police. Jack handed Emma the USB. Go, I'll keep watch out here. Emma strode inside, past sleepy guards and skeptical staff, and demanded to see the governor's chief legal advisor. It took threats, pleas, and finally a burst of raw desperation, but within 20 minutes she was in a stark office, audio file playing on the advisor's computer. The advisor's eyes widened. Where did you get this? Emma told him, quickly, honestly, leaving nothing out. If you don't act now, an innocent man will die, and the real killer will go free. The advisor nodded, picking up the phone. We'll get a stay. But you need to stay put. This could blow up fast. Emma nodded, adrenaline surging. As she left the room, she saw police cars pulling up outside. Maybe backup, maybe trouble. Jack met her at the car, face grim. Anything? Emma nodded. They're acting, but we're not safe yet. Gregory's men know we're coming for him, and Olivia's not picking up. She's gone, radio silent. Jack's jaw tightened. Then we move. We find Olivia, we find Hector, and we make sure no one else disappears before sunrise. Thunder rumbled above. Emma looked at the clock, less than 2 hours left. But for the first time, she felt the scales tipping. The truth was out there now, impossible to bury. All they had to do was survive until dawn. The city was coming awake, but it felt like a world suspended between night and day, between justice and the shadowy forces trying to erase the truth. Emma stared out the window of Jack's SUV as he drove through rain-slicked streets, the night's events replaying in her mind on a merciless loop. They'd done it. The evidence was now with the governor's office, and she clung to that hope like a lifeline. But the threats that had come, the distorted phone call, the anonymous texts, hung over her like a storm that refused to break. "Do you think they'll move fast enough?" Emma asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Jack's eyes stayed on the road. "They'll have to. The audio file's a bombshell. If the governor's legal team has any sense of decency, they'll at least halt the execution until it can be reviewed." Emma nodded, but her hands fidgeted in her lap. She glanced at her phone, still nothing from Olivia. She tried to convince herself that her friend was simply being careful, staying off the grid as instructed, but a deep unease gnawed at her gut. Olivia was a pro, but she was also stubborn, and the forces they'd awakened were desperate. They'd made enemies of men with everything to lose. Meanwhile, Olivia was pacing the small living room of Emma's house, curtains drawn, lights off except for the glow of her laptop. Duke sat alert at her feet, every so often lifting his head and whining as if sensing her nerves. Olivia checked her encrypted messaging app. Still no word from Emma, but at least that meant no one else had gotten through either. She'd locked every door, checked the windows twice. She tried to focus on her screen, scanning news alerts and court dockets for any hint that the governor's office was moving, but her mind kept wandering to Hector, to Richard in his cell, and to the steady thrum of fear at the back of her neck. When a car engine sounded in the driveway, Olivia froze. Duke's ears shot up, his body going rigid. A quick glance at the window revealed headlights slicing through the dark, stopping just short of the porch. Olivia's heart pounded. She killed the lights and reached for her phone. No time to call for help, not without risking her location. The front door rattled. Duke growled, deep and dangerous. Olivia eased back, barely breathing. A man's voice, muffled through the wood. "Olivia Jacobs, you need to come with us. Now." She recognized that accent, a voice from her nightmares, belonging to one of Gregory's security men. Fear shot through her, but Duke's presence gave her a glimmer of courage. She backed into the kitchen, grabbed the heavy flashlight from the counter, and moved toward the back door. Duke followed at her heel, silent but tense, ready for whatever came next. A window shattered, glass tinkled across the floor, and 2 men in dark coats poured into the room. Olivia swung the flashlight, striking the first man across the jaw. He yelped, stumbled, and Duke lunged, teeth bared, latching onto the intruder's arm. The second man shoved Olivia hard, sending her sprawling across the kitchen tiles. Pain shot up her shoulder, but she scrambled back, kicking at his legs. The first man managed to shake Duke loose, grabbing the dog by the scruff. Duke twisted, snapped at his attacker's hand, and Olivia seized the moment. She yanked open the back door and tried to bolt, but the second man caught her by the hair, yanking her off balance. "You should have kept your nose out of this," he spat. Duke leapt, his body a black blur colliding with the man's chest. Olivia wrenched free, only to feel an arm clamp around her waist. She screamed, fought, but the men were stronger and angrier than she'd imagined. Duke tried to protect her, snapping and growling, but one of the men slammed him with a metal pipe, sending him sprawling. "Bagger and the mutt. Boss wants both," one man growled. They dragged Olivia and Duke out the back, throwing them into the back of a van. Olivia's hands were zip-tied, her head pounding from where she'd hit the ground. Duke whimpered beside her, but even in pain, he nudged her hand, pressing close for comfort. Tears of frustration stung Olivia's eyes. She'd never felt so helpless, and she could only imagine what would happen if Emma found out her best friend had been taken. The van sped away, jostling over potholes and city curbs. Olivia strained to listen, memorizing every turn, every stop, anything that could help later. She focused on Duke, his warmth, his steady breathing, the promise in his eyes that he'd never give up on her. Back in the governor's annex, Emma paced the narrow hallway, phone pressed to her ear as she tried Olivia's number for the 10th time. Jack stood at the end of the corridor, eyes sharp, posture tense. A junior attorney finally appeared, pale and frazzled. "We've got the governor's signature. The execution is temporarily stayed pending further investigation. Your evidence is being reviewed by the Supreme Court Emergency Appeals Clerk as we speak." Relief and dread crashed over Emma at once. "Thank you. Please, keep us updated. There are people trying to silence this case." The attorney nodded grimly. "We've notified the police, too. You should lay low until this is over." As soon as the attorney left, Emma turned to Jack, her mask of composure slipping. "Something's wrong. Olivia's not answering. She should have checked in by now." Jack nodded, pulling out his burner phone. "I'll call a friend at APD. Quietly. Maybe they've seen anything unusual." Emma's heart hammered as she replayed the last hours in her mind. Every decision, every risk, every call she'd made. She has Duke. He's smart. He'll protect her, but... Jack put a hand on her shoulder. "We'll find them. But you need to be ready for whatever comes next. Gregory's people don't play games." Back in the van, Olivia pressed her cheek against Duke's fur, trying to calm her fear. She whispered, "Good boy, Duke. Hang in there." The van finally stopped. The doors were yanked open, and harsh lights blinded her. She was hauled out, Duke dragged beside her. A rough hand shoved her forward. A masked man loomed, voice cold and familiar. "You've made powerful enemies, Miss Jacobs. This story dies tonight." Olivia squared her jaw. "You're making a mistake. People know I'm missing. My friends won't stop." The man sneered. "Your friends can't help you. If Emma Caldwell wants to see you alive again, she'll do exactly as she's told. Or you and the dog disappear permanently." They locked Olivia and Duke in a small, windowless room. Bare concrete, a flickering bulb overhead, the air thick with damp and despair. Olivia struggled against her zip ties until her wrists bled, but they held tight. Duke whined, licking her face, trying to comfort her. Olivia forced herself to breathe, to think. She had to stay calm, to find a way out. She reached up, feeling around Duke's collar, her heart skipping, remembering the USB drive she'd hidden there, just in case. Outside, Emma's phone buzzed with a blocked number. She answered, her voice sharp with panic. A chilling, mechanical voice came through. "Stop digging, Emma. The next time you see your friend, she'll be dead. Call off your crusade, or you'll lose more than your reputation." Emma's knees nearly buckled. Jack caught her, holding her steady. "We'll get her back," he promised, "but we have to outsmart them. We play by our rules now." The night was almost over, but the darkest hour had just begun. The city's gray dawn was just starting to seep through the clouds as Emma sat rigidly in the corner of a police conference room, her fingers drumming the surface of a styrofoam cup she couldn't bring herself to drink from. On the wall, a digital clock showed how few hours were left before Richard's scheduled execution. Jack stood at the window, speaking quietly on his phone to the lawyer he'd pulled from bed, a grizzled legal veteran with deep connections at the governor's office and the state's Supreme Court. Emma's mind was fractured by worry. With the execution barely delayed, every minute mattered. Worse, Olivia and Duke had vanished. Emma tried to quiet the rising panic, clinging to Jack's words. "We play by our rules now." But what if that wasn't enough? What if the storm of power and corruption they'd kicked up swept away everyone she loved? Jack ended his call, eyes grave but focused. "The lawyer's already filed for a stay with the governor. He's pushing it to the Supreme Court as an emergency appeal. Your audio file and Hector's recording, both are in their hands now. But it'll take more than paperwork. They want confirmation, something the public can't ignore." Emma swallowed hard. "We need that final piece, something physical, something that ties Gregory directly to the setup." Jack nodded, looking at the door as an officer brought in a battered evidence box from the police archives, Richard's old case file. Emma pored over it, looking for any scrap that might have been overlooked. Phone records, receipts, fingerprints. She felt herself sinking into hopelessness until Jack pointed at the key they'd found in Hector's apartment. "Check the code stamped on that," he said. "It's from a self-storage facility. Maybe Hector hid something there, something that could tip the scales." Emma stared at the code. ATX 512, a storage unit on the east side, Hector's old neighborhood. "Let's go," Emma said. She grabbed the key, heart pounding. If there's anything there, it might save Richard's life, and Olivia's. Jack and Emma raced out, the storm easing but tension rising. They reached the facility just as the first rays of sun sliced through the clouds. Emma fumbled with the lock, hands shaking, and pulled up the rattling door. Inside, the space was nearly empty, except for a beat-up cardboard box and a torn gym bag. Jack rifled through them, and at the bottom of the bag found an old flip phone, a brown envelope, and a small digital camera. Emma's breath caught. Inside the envelope were photos. Gregory at a late-night party, talking to Linda Klein, slipping her an envelope. One showed Gregory, looking around nervously, shaking hands with a uniformed police detective. The same detective who'd handled Richard's original confession. Jack flipped open the phone and found a series of voicemails, all from Hector, sounding panicked. "Gregory knows. He said I'd better disappear. I don't want to get hurt. Please, if anything happens, give this to someone you trust." Jack pocketed the items. "This is it. Now we have motive, means, and a conspiracy. The governor's office can't ignore this." As they drove back, Jack called his lawyer friend, who immediately dispatched a police detail to collect the evidence. The lawyer also notified the governor's aide, who said they were preparing a press release, but needed every piece locked down before going public. Meanwhile, in the dim, musty room where Olivia and Duke were being held, the mood had shifted. Olivia's wrists throbbed from struggling against the zip ties. She fought to stay calm, running her fingers through Duke's thick fur. "It's okay, boy. We're not done yet." Duke nuzzled her, then turned and began gnawing determinedly at the cheap rope binding his own legs. Olivia watched in amazement as the dog's powerful jaws shredded the restraint. It took time, but Duke was relentless. When his paws were finally free, he turned to Olivia's wrists, licking them as if encouraging her to hold on. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Olivia tensed, hearing the metallic clank of the door's lock. She pressed the USB, still hidden in Duke's collar, deeper out of sight. One of the masked men stormed in, grabbing her by the arm. "We're moving you. Too much attention downtown. Boss wants it quiet." The man yanked Olivia to her feet, ignoring Duke's low growl. As they left the room, Olivia risked everything, twisting her body and shoving hard into her captor, forcing him to stumble. In the chaos, Duke leaped up, biting the man's arm. The guard yelled, trying to shake him off, but Duke held tight, giving Olivia the moment she needed to run. She burst down the hallway, found a back door propped open by a cinder block, and fled into a blinding shaft of morning sun. Duke bolted after her, barking. Another guard chased them, but Duke turned, baring his teeth and snarling, making the man hesitate just long enough for Olivia to escape around the building. They ran, hearts pounding, ducking through alleyways, searching for help. Olivia spotted a figure coming out of a nearby hardware store, an older man in army fatigues. Desperate, she ran to him. "Please, help! They're after us!" The veteran, sizing up the situation in an instant, ushered her inside. He locked the door behind them, handed Olivia his phone, and said, "Call the police. Now. And let me see that dog's collar. I was K9 in Iraq. I know a working dog when I see one." Olivia fumbled with Duke's collar, pulling out the hidden USB drive. The veteran, whose name was Paul, drove them in his battered pickup to the nearest police station. There, Olivia handed over the USB, and Paul explained what he'd seen. Inside the police station, the video was loaded onto a computer for review. It was footage from Gregory's drunken confession at a private party. The camera captured Gregory, glassy-eyed and slurring, bragging. "She said no. So I made her disappear and pinned it on a bum. Easy. Nobody misses people like that." Faces in the room blanched as the video played. The detectives called the governor's office. The evidence was rushed to state officials, and within minutes, confirmed by forensic specialists. Every thread Olivia, Emma, and Jack had gathered was now woven into an unbreakable rope of truth. Back at the police conference room, Emma's phone rang. Olivia's voice trembled, but was alive with relief. "We're safe. Duke got us out. We got the evidence to the cops. It's all out in the open now, Emma. They can't stop it." Emma wept openly, tears of joy and gratitude. Jack clapped her on the back. "You did it. You all did. Now let's finish this." Minutes later, an official message arrived from the governor's office. The stay of execution had been granted. A helicopter was being dispatched, carrying the legal paperwork and fresh evidence, racing toward the prison less than an hour before Richard was set to die. Duke, now resting at Olivia's feet, licked her hand, his tail thumping softly. Heroes came in all shapes, and sometimes they barked. As the first rays of true morning lit the city, Emma, Jack, Olivia, and Duke knew the fight wasn't over, but the tide had turned. The proof walked, and with it, hope. The city was barely stirring, bathed in that gray-blue hue that comes before sunrise. But inside the governor's annex, and at the state prison on the outskirts of Austin, adrenaline was spiking. A man's life was hanging in the balance. Emma sat in the back seat of Jack's SUV, clutching her phone, unable to keep her leg from bouncing. Olivia sat beside her, cheeks still smudged with dirt from her escape, Duke's head resting comfortingly on her lap. The reunion in the police station had been brief, emotional, just enough for tears, a fierce hug, and the hurried exchange of what each had endured through the night. Now, united again, they sped toward the governor's office, chasing the thinnest sliver of hope. The legal team was already in chaos when they arrived. Staffers with hastily knotted ties and half-empty coffee cups hustled through the corridors. In the war room, a giant digital clock counted down the minutes to sunrise, 45 minutes until Richard's scheduled execution. Emma and Olivia were ushered into the inner sanctum, where the governor himself, still in shirt sleeves, was reviewing the new evidence: Hector's audio file, the photographs from the storage locker, the USB video of Gregory's drunken confession. All of it laid bare, in damning detail, the full machinery of the frame job. The governor's legal advisor, already pale from exhaustion, looked up. "You did everything right. Now it's up to us." Emma swallowed, fighting to steady her nerves. "Is it enough? Will it stop the execution?" The governor met her eyes, voice low, but sure. "It has to. We've initiated the emergency stay, but it's not automatic. The paperwork must physically reach the warden before the injection is given. We're sending a state trooper helicopter to the prison with the documents right now." Olivia's voice was tight, ragged. "You have to hurry." "Gregory's people. They'll try anything to stop this. You have no idea how far they'll go." The governor nodded. "We've increased security. No one's getting near that chopper." He looked at Duke and managed a half smile. "I hear we owe this guy, too." The legal advisor handed Emma a phone connected to the warden's office. The warden's voice was tense. "We've been told to expect your order. We're running the final pre-execution checks now, but we need it here, in hand, before we can stop the procedure." Emma's mind raced. The prison was nearly an hour away by car, less than half that by air, assuming the chopper didn't hit trouble. Every second mattered. Suddenly, Jack burst into the room, phone in hand. "There's chatter on the police scanner. Unidentified vehicles near the prison perimeter. Some kind of disturbance." The governor stiffened, motioning for the legal team to double their efforts. "Get a direct line to the state police in the air. I want that chopper to land no matter what." In the background, a massive flat screen showed the progress of the helicopter, a small blip inching toward the prison compound as sunrise loomed. The minutes ticked by in gut-wrenching silence. Meanwhile, in his cell, Richard Gaines knelt on the cold floor, staring through the bars at the sliver of light growing outside his window. He'd been awake all night, nerves stretched to breaking, a sense of calm resignation seeping in with the dawn. In his hands, he still held the old library book that had kept him sane during the long years, its cover dog-eared, words nearly memorized. A guard appeared. "You ready, Gaines?" Richard nodded, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Ready as I'll ever be. Back in the war room, Emma listened to the helicopter's pilot over the speakerphone. We're 2 minutes out. Prison security has the pad cleared. There are protesters gathering at the gate. Media, activists, everyone's watching. The governor stepped forward, his presence suddenly commanding. As soon as that bird lands, someone runs that stay directly to the warden. No detours. We're cutting it close. Olivia's heart hammered in her chest. If something happens, if they don't make it... Emma squeezed her hand. They will. They have to. In the execution chamber, Richard was strapped to the gurney. His heart thudded in his chest, but he kept his gaze steady. He thought of Emma, of Olivia, of Duke, of the small moments of kindness he'd been shown, even in the darkest place. He whispered a silent prayer for forgiveness, for truth, for someone, anyone, to believe in him. The warden stood by the phone, waiting, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. The medical team prepared the IV line. The digital clock in the chamber ticked down. 6:41 a.m., 19 minutes to sunrise. The helicopter landed in a swirl of dust and noise. The trooper carrying the legal envelope leapt out, racing through the sally port. Prison guards shouted, clearing a path as the man sprinted, papers held high above his head. The warden's phone rang. We have the order. Stay of execution. Signed, sealed, official. Emma, Olivia, and Jack heard the warden's voice over the speaker. Hold the procedure. I repeat, hold the procedure. In the execution chamber, everything stopped. The doctor lowered the syringe. Richard closed his eyes, a single tear tracing down his cheek. He didn't know what had happened, only that the room's energy shifted, that hope returned in a rush. He whispered, "Thank you." Outside, media vans swarmed the prison gates. Word spread in an instant. Stay of execution granted. New evidence exonerates Richard Gaines. Emma collapsed into a chair, sobbing with relief, as Olivia hugged her, and Duke, sensing the shift, leapt up to lick their faces. Jack wiped his eyes discreetly, then cracked a tired grin. We did it. You did it. The governor shook Emma's hand, voice hoarse. Thank you for not giving up. This state owes you, all of you, including that dog, a debt it can never repay. Emma's voice broke, but she managed to smile. Just do right by Richard, and make sure this never happens again. Olivia looked around the room at their exhausted team, at Jack, at Duke sprawled on the floor, and felt something she hadn't felt in years, genuine hope. The system wasn't perfect, but it could still be forced to listen. It could still be made to care. As the sun finally rose, painting the clouds with gold, the war room was filled with laughter, tears, and the stunned silence of people who'd seen a miracle. For Richard, and for everyone who'd ever been silenced, the world was listening now. Inside the execution chamber, every movement seemed slowed, stretched by the weight of the moment. Richard Gaines lay strapped to the gurney, staring up at the ceiling's harsh fluorescent lights. The needle was poised at his arm, the doctor's face a mask of professional detachment, while behind the glass, witnesses waited in tense, almost reverent silence. The only sound was the soft, mechanical tick of the clock, each second more excruciating than the last. Just as the IV line was about to be connected, a commotion erupted outside the chamber. The warden, clutching the governor's official order, burst through the door, flanked by a cluster of guards and the breathless state trooper who'd delivered the life-saving envelope. Stop the procedure. Stay of execution. Immediate, the warden barked, voice sharp as a thunderclap. The medical team froze. One nurse stepped away from the gurney, hands trembling. The doctor nodded tightly, pulled the needle back, and stepped aside. Richard blinked in disbelief. He'd heard the words, but they didn't make sense. How could the world change in the span of a heartbeat? The warden approached, face taut with a strange blend of triumph and apology. Mr. Gaines, the governor has granted a stay. New evidence has come to light. You're not going to die today. The warden's voice, usually so cold and bureaucratic, trembled as he spoke. Richard tried to speak, but emotion closed his throat. He managed a small nod, tears spilling down the sides of his face onto the white paper beneath his head. The relief in the room was palpable, radiating from staff, guards, even the witnesses behind the glass. One of the guards, a hardened veteran, stepped forward to gently unbuckle Richard from the restraints, patting his shoulder with an unexpected kindness. "Hang in there, son. It's over. It's really over." Meanwhile, outside the prison, news of the stay swept like wildfire. Protesters gathered at the gates, let out a collective cheer. Journalists scrambled to capture the moment, microphones thrust into the faces of anyone with a badge or a press credential. Camera crews broadcast live as the sun rose over the compound, illuminating a morning heavy with hope and vindication. Emma, Olivia, Jack, and Duke watched from the governor's annex, their exhaustion briefly forgotten as the news crackled through every radio, phone, and television screen. Emma buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably as the emotional toll of the night finally crashed over her. Olivia hugged her fiercely, her own eyes wet with tears, while Duke barked and spun in circles, tail wagging like a banner of victory. Jack leaned against the wall, shoulders shaking with relief. He looked at Emma and Olivia with deep gratitude. This is what justice looks like. Messy, late, but real. You two, hell, all of us. You saved a man's life. Emma wiped her face, still in disbelief. We almost lost him. If that helicopter had been a minute later. Her voice broke again, but this time it was with gratitude, not despair. As the official process ground into motion, Richard escorted out of the chamber, doctors confirming his health, legal advisors swarming with paperwork, the truth began to settle in. Gregory Milner, whose arrogance and cruelty had driven the entire ordeal, was arrested that same evening. Footage of his drunken confession and phone records showing payments to police officials became headline news. Law enforcement, under immense pressure, launched a full investigation into the corruption network that had nearly cost Richard his life. Back at the police station, Olivia gave her statement, reliving the terror of her abduction and the unlikely heroism of Duke. The officers, skeptical at first, became believers when they saw the bite marks on the kidnappers and reviewed the GPS footage showing Duke's wild, determined escape. Paul, the veteran who'd sheltered them, was lauded for his quick thinking, and Duke was fitted with an honorary K-9 badge. A local hero now, his story spreading rapidly through the community. Emma, finally able to breathe, reached out to Richard's lawyer and the Innocence Project, ensuring every last detail of the case was reviewed and any remaining doubts erased. She spent hours on the phone, coordinating with the media, speaking with advocacy groups, and giving statement after statement, not for glory, but because she needed the world to know justice could only exist if someone kept fighting for it. When Emma and Olivia were finally allowed to visit Richard, he was sitting in a small, bare holding room, dressed in a fresh jumpsuit, hands trembling from exhaustion. When he saw Emma, he stood, awkward, uncertain, overwhelmed. Emma stepped forward and hugged him, her own composure nearly crumbling again. "I'm so sorry, Richard," she whispered, "for everything." He shook his head gently, voice hoarse but steady. "You believed in me when it mattered. That's enough." He glanced at Olivia and grinned as Duke bounded in, tail wagging, tongue lolling. "Is Duke okay?" Olivia laughed, falling to her knees beside the big dog. "He's better than okay. He's a hero." The three of them, Emma, Olivia, and Richard, sat together as the sun continued its rise. For a moment time seemed to pause. The trauma was real, the scars would remain, but hope had returned. They had pulled a life back from the brink. The world, so often indifferent, had been forced to listen. And in the middle of it all, Duke sprawled across their feet, blissfully unaware of his fame, content only to be with his people. Later, as the investigation into Gregory and his network accelerated, Emma took stock of what they had all endured. She saw, perhaps for the first time, that the fight for justice was not a single battle, but a long, grinding war. One fought in courtrooms, in police stations, in the quiet resilience of ordinary people refusing to give up. And as dusk fell, the city's skyline awash in pink and gold, Emma sat with Olivia and Duke on the porch, the weight of the past finally lifting. In the distance, church bells rang, a celebration or maybe just a reminder. Hope, once found, must always be protected. For Richard Gaines, and for everyone wrongfully accused, a new chapter had begun. And for Emma, Olivia, and Duke, a new purpose shone bright as the morning. A month had passed since the stormy night that changed so many lives in Austin. The city had returned to its everyday rhythms. Coffee shops crowded, traffic horns echoing, children's laughter floating on the breeze. But for those touched by the case, nothing felt quite the same. In quiet moments, the memories returned, the rain hammering down, the desperation of that final race against time, the raw hope that something so broken could be set right again. For Richard Gaines, freedom was both a gift and a challenge. On the day of his release, Emma stood waiting outside the gates, Duke pacing anxiously at her side, Olivia holding a small "Welcome Home" sign she'd scribbled on a sheet of cardboard in a hurry. When Richard appeared, wearing borrowed jeans and a clean white shirt, he paused in the sunlight, almost blinded by its warmth after so many years under fluorescent prison lights. Emma approached first, uncertain if words would be enough. "Richard, I'm sorry for everything." He stopped her with a gentle smile, sadness and gratitude mingling in his tired eyes. "You helped save my life. I don't blame you. All I want now is to live free, and to see if Duke remembers me." At the sound of his name, Duke bounded forward, tail wagging in wild circles, tongue lolling as he crashed into Richard's legs, nearly knocking him over. Richard knelt, embracing the big dog, burying his face in Duke's thick fur as if to hide the tears welling in his eyes. Olivia snapped a photo. The image would soon go viral online, symbolizing not just a man's release, but the healing power of forgiveness. They drove away together, leaving the prison behind. Emma offered Richard a place to stay. "Just for a while," she insisted, until he got his feet under him. Olivia called in favors with local journalists and advocacy groups, helping Richard secure a job interview at a small animal shelter. Jack sent a text promising to visit soon, adding that he'd never trust city officials again without a canine backup team. For a while, it almost felt like the world was setting itself right. But healing, Emma realized, was never neat or easy. Richard carried scars, invisible to most, but obvious to anyone who paid attention. The way he flinched at sudden noises, the insomnia that haunted his nights, the awkwardness in crowded rooms. He spoke quietly, grateful, but cautious, as if waiting for it all to be snatched away. At times, Emma saw the guilt flicker in his eyes, not just for his own suffering, but for Linda Klein, whose death had set everything in motion. The world had nearly let them both be forgotten. Olivia, too, changed in subtle ways. She threw herself into her reporting, championing wrongful conviction stories. But she was slower to trust, her laughter softer, her eyes wary in public places. She and Duke never missed their evening walks, finding comfort in routine and in each other's company. Olivia wrote a long-form piece about Richard's ordeal, weaving together the humanity, heartbreak, and hard-won hope that came from the case. It spread across the country, sparking public debate and calls for criminal justice reform. For Olivia, the work was a way to process trauma and to ensure that Richard's story, and Linda's, wouldn't be lost again. Emma's life changed most of all. The case forced her to confront her own failings, to reckon with the ways ambition and pressure could cloud the truth. After years of running from her past, she accepted a teaching position at the law school where she'd once dreamed of making a difference. On her first day, she stood before a class of nervous students, her voice trembling only slightly as she recounted the story of Richard Gaines, not as a cautionary tale, but as a lesson in humility, responsibility, and the price of justice. She challenged her students to ask hard questions, to be unafraid of doubt, and above all, to remember that the law was meant to protect the innocent, not just punish the guilty. One afternoon, the local police department held a small ceremony in honor of Duke, presenting him with an honorary badge and a custom vest. News crews arrived to capture the moment, children clapped, and for a little while, all the pain seemed far away. Richard shook the police chief's hand, a gesture of forgiveness and acceptance, while Duke basked in the attention, blissfully unaware of how many lives he had helped save. As the weeks turned into autumn, the four friends, Emma, Olivia, Richard, and Duke, met regularly, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to sit in silence and share a bottle of cheap wine. They laughed about Duke's newfound celebrity, about Jack's persistent paranoia, and about Olivia's stubborn refusal to let a single injustice slip by. The past wasn't forgotten, but it no longer defined them. One chilly Saturday morning, Emma received a letter in the mail, handwritten, carefully folded. It was from Richard. Dear Emma, I'm starting to feel like myself again. I got the job at the animal shelter. The dogs don't judge, they just need kindness. I want to thank you for believing, for fighting, and for not giving up, even when the world told you to stop. I hope you'll visit soon. Maybe bring Duke by for a visit. He's always welcome here. I wish Linda's family peace. I hope they can heal too. Thank you for giving me back my life. Emma read the letter aloud to Olivia as Duke lay sprawled at their feet, and together they sat quietly, letting the words sink in. The scars remained, inside and out, but with every day, every act of grace, they grew smaller, replaced by something stronger. Forgiveness, healing, hope. Emma looked out over her backyard, Duke's badge glinting in the late sunlight, Olivia's laughter rising like music. In that moment, she knew they couldn't undo the past, but they could build a future worth living for, all of them, together. A gentle breeze swept across Emma's backyard as the sun dipped low, painting the Austin sky in strokes of orange and lavender. The city hummed in the distance, but here the world felt hushed, peaceful for the first time in a long while. Emma sat on the porch steps with Duke sprawled beside her, the dog's ears pricked and alert, his eyes never leaving her, as if he understood every word, every silence. In her lap rested a letter, folded and creased from too many readings, Richard's thank you, sent just a week after his release. Each time Emma read his careful handwriting, she felt the last pieces of her old guilt crumble away. There would always be scars, on Richard, on herself, on the city's battered sense of justice. But there was also something else now, the certainty that truth, once unleashed, refused to be buried again. Olivia joined her, settling next to Duke and passing over 2 mugs of tea. You know, I never thought I'd see the day when the 3 of us could sit here and just breathe. She grinned, her eyes brighter, the old shadows slowly fading. Emma sipped her tea and gazed out over the yard, where Richard was helping a neighbor's child throw a ball for Duke. The dog bounded across the grass, tongue lolling, chasing joy with every leap. Laughter rose from the yard, unforced, ringing, utterly free. Do you ever wonder if it was worth it? Olivia asked quietly. All the pain, the fear, the nearly losing everything. Emma didn't hesitate. Yes, every second. Because if we'd given up, if we'd let the system win, Richard would be gone, and so would a part of us. She looked at Olivia, voice steady. We didn't just save Richard. We saved ourselves. For a while, neither spoke. They watched Duke trot back, triumphant, dropping the ball at the little girl's feet. Richard knelt, smiling, at ease for the first time since his ordeal. The child giggled, throwing her arms around Duke's neck, and the big dog soaked up the attention, basking in the warmth of belonging. Emma remembered all the nights spent doubting herself, haunted by Richard's calm, wounded eyes at his sentencing. She had been so sure of her role, so certain she was doing what was right. It took nearly losing everything for her to see the cracks in the foundation, the cost of ignoring doubt and refusing to question. That night, as the stars pricked the sky, the small group gathered around Emma's table. Olivia with her battered notebook, Richard sharing quiet stories of the shelter, Jack dropping by with a bottle of wine, and his usual sarcastic wit. Duke curled up at Emma's feet, nose twitching with contentment. Jack raised his glass. To truth, the kind that bites back, even when it's buried. They all laughed. The moment light and genuine. Emma glanced at the stack of letters she'd begun receiving, some from law students, others from people inspired by Richard's story, and a few from families still waiting for their own justice. She kept them in a box by her bed, reminders that their battle had meaning beyond their own pain. Later, as the others drifted away and the night deepened, Emma sat alone under the porch light, reflecting on everything that had happened. She picked up her pen and began writing her own letter, a new beginning for herself and for anyone who might read it. Justice isn't something you inherit or stumble upon. It's something you chase, sometimes for years, sometimes through heartbreak and loss. It's messy, imperfect, and never guaranteed. But as long as someone is willing to keep searching, keep asking, keep fighting, truth finds a way to break through, even when those in power try to silence it, even when fear and doubt seem to win. Truth has teeth. It never stops biting. And sometimes that's what saves us. Duke's ears perked as Emma finished her letter, as if approving the sentiment. Olivia rejoined her, settling in with a soft smile. "What are you writing?" Emma folded the letter. "A reminder, to myself, to my students, to anyone who needs it. That justice is possible. That hope barks louder than fear." Olivia nudged Duke, who thumped his tail in reply. "He knows who speaks the truth, Emma. Maybe that's all any of us need. Someone who won't stop believing, no matter what." In the end, Richard's story became a beacon for others, a symbol that justice delayed was not always justice denied. His exoneration led to reforms, new laws about evidence review, and a flood of volunteers for the Innocence Project. Emma's lectures inspired a new wave of lawyers and advocates who promised to chase the truth wherever it led. Duke, the unlikely hero, became a local legend, appearing at community events, his badge shining as a testament to courage and loyalty. Children flocked to him, parents asked for photos, and every time someone doubted whether a single voice could make a difference, the answer was clear. One person, one dog, one act of hope could change the world. As the story closed, Emma turned to the audience, the invisible listeners, the seekers of hope. Her message was simple, but it rang with conviction. If this story moved you, if you believe that justice should never rest, like and follow our channel. Share these stories. Speak up, even when you're afraid, because the truth will always have teeth, and sometimes it takes ordinary heroes to set it free. The night wrapped them in gentle silence, and in that stillness, Emma, Olivia, Richard, and Duke knew that the fight for truth and justice would go on. One story, one life, one hard-won hope at a time.